I think we're at 6 o'clock, so I think we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you to all of you for joining us tonight. This is the training for officers for school community councils. And we'll try to go through and provide a little background for you, but it's more important to me that I answer your questions than I just feed you a whole lot of information. So please raise your hand as we go through or type something in the chat box, and I'll stop periodically and just ask if anybody has any questions, because this can be pretty informal. It looks like we've got like maybe 12 people or so, something like that. So it's not too many people for us to be interactive. So welcome tonight, and we're just going to go ahead and get started. So the first thing I want you to be aware of in this training is that you do not need to write down everything that's on every slide, because this presentation will be posted on the School Land Trust website. It takes about a week, but it'll be there with all of the information. And so that website address you can see right there, schools.utah.gov, and then /School Land Trust. Everything will be there. And I'm going to refer to that website a little bit this evening and show you how to kind of navigate it and find the things that you're looking for. So I just want you to know you don't have to be taking copious notes, because you'll be able to find all of this information eventually. So, so the very first thing that when we start having conversations about requirements for school community councils or what officers do, I just like to try and bring us all back to the place where we have to remember that even though there are laws and rules and requirements and things that have to happen, but what this is all about really is improving achievement for students. And so when we get bogged down in the wheres and why-fors, it's just nice to take a deep breath and say, wait a minute, this is about the kids. What can we do about our students? How can we resolve this problem so that students benefit? So hopefully we can just, every once in a while, you just have to come back and say, even though you've got to do agendas and post minutes and do all that, this is really about kids, and that's what we want. That's where we want to be focusing. So first thing I'm going to do is take you to the website, because a lot of the information that I'm going to be referring to is on the website, and I want you to be able to find it when you need it, because you're not going to need it right this minute, but at some point in time you will. So this is the School Land Trust website. It's the State Board of Education. If you forget anything else, just go to the State Board of Education website and search for School Land Trust, and it should bring this up. So that little box there in the right-hand corner when you get logged in is what we're going to talk about first, because that's kind of the navigation pane, and I'm going to try to show you how you can find what you need from there. Okay, so this is the same thing, only it's blown up so that you could read it. Don't worry about that first login item. That's where your principal or the district would go to, like, approve plans or enter information. So you don't need to worry about that part. The School Land Trust program has lots of background information about the program, generally requirements and so on and so forth. So that's where you'd find that kind of information. The next one is obviously timelines and due dates. And we've got a couple of suggested timelines there that might help you when you're preparing your own timeline. Under councils is where you're going to find things like elections, how to hold elections, the rules of order and procedure that you need to adopt and post on your website, and other website requirements. Those kinds of things that are lists and things that you might want to print off and say, oh, do we have everything on our website? Well, that's where you would go to find the list. The next one is a page that's kind of dedicated to parents. It's a list of kind of frequently asked questions that come to us, and there are mostly links there. So it would ask a question and then there's a link so that you can find where you get the answer to that question. I didn't mean to do that. Okay, so then under resources is where you would find, for instance, a list of the district contacts, which means who in your district administers this program. So if you needed to ask a question about something specific in your district, you can go there and find who that person is, and it has contact information. The school safety and digital citizenship requirement for councils, there's information there. There's also listed the laws and the rules, which hopefully you don't have to digest, but every once in a while someone may question you, and that's where you can find the actual laws and rules if you need it. Now we're going to come back to this one on my school reports and councils. So I want to show you how to use that because I think it will be useful. Training is where you would find this training. We are sending out almost monthly some other kind of short 5-minute training that you could show at the beginning of your council meeting. I've been working on one today that we'll be sending out probably on Monday that's specifically about the school safety and digital citizenship requirement. So you can watch for those to come and know that there'll be short trainings coming throughout the year for your council. The school trust is where you're going to find information about everybody who's involved with the trust. So you probably are a little bit aware that there are actually lands granted to schools at statehood scattered across the state. And it links you to the people who manage those lands and the people who manage the funds. So once the lands generate revenue, then it goes into a permanent fund, and it links to those land managers and other things related specifically to the trust. The last one is a place where you can link to contact elected officials if you have the need to. So we're going to go, are there any questions on any of this yet before I launch into the next step? Okay. Just know that I've only got a really small screen of who's participating, so you might have to unmute so that your little box comes up where I can see it, or put something in the chat box. Okay, let's go to the next one. So this is a list that has too much information on it for a slide, but I want you to know that this list, so this is kind of a checklist for councils, chairs, what you are required to do and what's recommended. And this list is under that training tab. So at the end of this meeting, you can go there and find this and use it as a checklist or a guide for you going forward. That's the only reason I posted it, so that you would know what it looks like when you get there. Okay, so that link that said My School Reports Councils, if you click on that, this first box that has reports in purple comes up, and you're going to click on that link. When you open that link, it's going to open kind of a query, and you're going to select for any school. You can search any of this information for any school in the state. You're going to select the district, the school. You're going to select a report year. So there's information there going back 5 years. You can select the report type, and there's a couple of different reports. So you can look for finance, the amount of money a school received for the past 5 years. You can look for their actual plan that's being implemented this year or last year. You can look for final reports from the prior years that kind of explain this is what we plan to do and this is what actually happened. The members of your councils are also posted there. So let's go to the next one, and I'll show you for an example. This is one that I did, and I know it's probably tiny for you to see, but I selected Granite District. Then for the school, I selected Skyline High School. So when you click on that little arrow, it just provides a drop-down menu and you select one of them. So I selected Skyline High School, and then I selected the 1920 school year. So that would be last year. And then I clicked on the funding report. So this is what it pulls up when you then click on View Report. Here's the report, and it shows how much money that school received for the last 5 years. When the amount for the upcoming school year is figured for each school, then it will populate that end box that's just showing 0, so that you will know when you're preparing the plan. After you come back from winter break and you start preparing your plan, you can know exactly how much money the school will be receiving. It will show up right there in that box. So hopefully that's helpful. That's where you can find school-specific information. Okay, so that's navigating the website. Do you have any questions so far about anything? Okay.
I do.
Okay, yes, go ahead. Julie?
Yes, thank you. So I thought that the website was going to be offline come November. So how would we still have access to looking at what you just showed us? Or is that also part of the website that's going to be down?
Great question, Julie. Thank you for asking that. It's the side of the website where plans and reports, where data is entered, is what's going to go down. And it is going to go down in about a week, and it will be down clear until mid-January. But the pages that I just showed you are on the public pages, are on the State Board of Education website, and that information will all still be there. So you should be able to find, any of that information will still be there. Okay, so
I have a question.
Sure, go ahead.
So my understanding was that information had to be available to public on our individual school website, but does this website actually fulfill that requirement that these reports are available to the public?
Nope. Unfortunately, the law requires that you do certain postings on your specific school website. Now, in some cases, you might be able to copy a link and put the link on your website, but I would double check and make sure that it actually links to this website. So for instance, if you pulled up the school plan for this school year and you wanted to post that on your website, you want to copy paste what's in the URL, but just test it out and make sure that it really will take you there before you just assume that you're filling that requirement. Is that making sense?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, some of them work, and some of them will end up taking somebody to a place where they have to log in, and then that's not really very helpful. Okay, so let's talk about the responsibilities of the chair, because we know across the state, I have a couple of principals who couldn't submit their membership form because they couldn't get anybody to be the chair, right? And so some of you, I'm sure, are being the chair because somebody nominated you or because you missed the first meeting. Sometimes that happens. It isn't usually a real coveted position, but it's an important position, and the work that you do is important. It's the responsibility of the chair to lead. It's also your responsibility to facilitate and coordinate. It's not your job to do all the work. That's not your job. You have a committee, and the committee elected you, and the committee should be willing to assume responsibilities and do part of the work. So you lead, they participate. It's also their job to make sure they're representing the interests of the group that elected them or appointed them. So when you're talking about actions that you're going to take, Parents on the committee ought to be listening to parents in the community, and the same is true for the employee representatives, because you're representing. Okay, there's a question here about how do you get credentials for logging in? You do not need to log in. Everything that you need is on that public page. The login feature is just really for principals. And then it's also the responsibility of those people who elected you to share the workload. So so we're going to talk about that for just a minute. These are kind of responsibilities of chairs. And again, don't feel like you have to write everything down because it's all on that list on the website. But excuse me, I'm going to go back for just a minute. I think it's always a really good idea at one of your first meetings, if you haven't already done this, to go around the table, or now lots of times this stuff is happening virtually, but to have every single person on the council introduce themselves, maybe tell you a little bit about their experience in school, serving on school community councils. But another really important thing to understand is like what they do in their real life, in their real job, and other interests that they have. Then when you're making assignments to share the workload, you'll have some sense of what different people feel comfortable doing, if that's making sense. It also helps the group to know each other. They may not all know each other well, so I would really encourage that. But the exercise really is to help you to understand who you can call on to do different things. Oh my goodness. In my office, if you sit too long without moving, the lights go out. So they just went out, but they're back on again. Okay, so the first thing is meetings. It is your responsibility to, for the council to set a meeting schedule for the year. Now, if you say, for instance, that you're going to meet on the first Wednesday of the month, each month, and it turns out the Valentine's Day is on the first Wednesday, for instance. I don't think that's true this year, but if it was, when you get closer to February, you can change that meeting, but you need to post it on your website. And the reason being is you want people to know what you're doing when you're meeting. If parents want to have issues at their school addressed, they know when you're meeting, they know how to get a hold of you and have their interests addressed. So you're going to want to set a meeting schedule for the year. Then you need to decide how is the council going to be trained, because annual training is required. You can't expect council members to know what they're supposed to do if they don't know what their responsibilities are. And there's a lot of ways to do that. Districts often do training, and we have trainings on our website. I talked to you about the short trainings that go out each month on a specific topic. When you're getting ready to plan your elections, there's one on how to hold an election. So the question I'm seeing, a couple of questions here. Let's go and do those. So if the principal is facilitating and leading the meetings, should that continue, or does that always fall to the chair? It should be the chair. It's important to the legislature that the parents have a voice in what's happening at the school. So it should be the chair. If the chair feels uncomfortable about doing that, they can delegate that responsibility maybe to the vice chair. But as time goes on and you feel more comfortable chairing the meeting, you should do it. Sometimes principals end up doing it just because they can't convince the chair they're supposed to do it. If they just know you're willing to do it, they will be happy to let you do that. Okay, somebody posted the website. Let's see what else have I got here that we need to answer. I think we've got everything, don't we? Oh, does this count as training? Well, this is training for you, but you're going to want to make sure that your entire council is trained. Okay, so that's kind of the difference. what are my responsibilities as a member of this council? So you're going to plan on training. And the next thing, or is this not working? Don't you hate it when technology doesn't work? Okay, we'll do it this way. Okay, so then the next thing is what you just, that question that you just barely asked is about required postings. There are postings that are required that need to go on your school website. Now, obviously, you're not going to be able to do the posting because somebody at the school has special privileges to post on the website. But you're going to want to work out in the meeting, how do we get information to whoever at the school does the posting so that it can be posted? Because, for instance, your agenda is supposed to be posted at least a week in advance. So you prepare the agenda, the minutes from the prior meeting, those are supposed to be posted on the website, and you're going to want to know how do we go about making sure that happens. Okay, I have a question here about elections. Now, elections, okay, sometimes a little bit of confusion about elections, and we had a couple of phone calls the other day specific to this. So the elections that elect you to the council, that elect members to the council, those happen one time a year. And it can either happen in the spring, if you're finished before the end of the school year. I think you need to be finished a week before the end of the school year, or you can hold them in the fall. Most schools hold them in the fall because if you hold them in the spring, you need to notice parents of incoming students so that they can vote in the election as well, because that's who you'll be representing the following year. And that's the reason many schools hold their election in the fall, when all of the students who are going to be in the school are there. There are some schools that have projects during the summer, and so they want to get started. And so sometimes that happens. Sometimes you have a 2-year middle school, and if you or you may have people that want to serve, and they want certain things to be in place before the school year. Those are usually the reasons people hold them in the spring. Then once you get on the council, and this is sometimes a little bit confusing, once the council is seated, it's the council that elects their officers, that elects a chair and a vice chair. The chair and the vice chair are not elected by the parents and employees of the school. They're elected by the council. So hopefully that's clear. Okay, someone can serve on the council. It's a 2-year term. So that's something you'd want to put in your rules of order and procedure. You want to have odd year members and even year members so that half are alternating every single year. But it's a 2-year term. If someone needs to resign or someone moves away or whatever, then the parents get together and they appoint somebody to fill that unexpired term. But the term doesn't start over again for 2 years. They just finish the term that was left and not completed. Okay, so the next thing is, I think that I'm in something that it doesn't want to be in. So here we go. So then the next thing the council is going to want to do is they're going to want to review the plans. So you have a plan that's supposed to be implemented this school year, and you are going to want to review that so you know what it is that the school is doing, how the council is spending their money for the year. So set a meeting, decide how the council is going to be trained, check on the required postings on the website, and do a review of the plans. And then the next thing, of course, is to make sure that we're always focused on students and the people are representing the entity that elected them. Okay, let's see, we've got a couple more questions here. Let's see. Yes, you have to hold elections. If it turns out in the election that you don't have enough people run to fill the spots, so say you have three open spots for this current school year, and you held the election, you only had 3 people apply, then you don't have to hold the formal election where parents actually vote. You basically held the election, you gave people the opportunity to apply. So let's say, for instance, you had 3 positions open and you only had 2 people apply. Well, those people then are on the council, but you've got 1 more position that needs to be filled. So what happens is the parents on the council, so you're probably going to have, you've got 2 that have been elected, and you're going to have maybe 2 or 3 other parents. Those parents get together and find someone to fill that position. You can serve more than 2 years, but at the end of each term, you need to be up for election again. You have to go through the process again. Can the term be extended to do limited availability? No. And some of these rules are rules of the legislature. You have to remember that legislators feel really comfortable with elections, right? We're going through elections right now, and it's a world that they know. It's not necessarily a world we all know or feel comfortable with, but it's how they have set in place who represents parents and teachers on the council, and how we make sure that it's fair when people are making decisions about money. Yes, the answer to your question is teachers elect the teachers and parents elect the parents. Okay, let's go on to the next thing. I think what happens is I get in the chat box and then this thing, I have to have Jerry explain this to me. Okay, okay, let's talk. So that's kind of setting up the council so you're ready to operate. Now let's talk about the responsibilities of the council. There's something called the Teacher and Student Success Plan. It used to be called the School Improvement Plan, and some of your districts may still call it the School Improvement Plan, but it's called the Teacher and Student Success Plan, and it's the overarching plan for the school for academic improvement. It can have academic components, and it can also have non-academic components. The Teacher and Student Success Plan has money attached to it. The principal, with input from the council, prepares that plan. And that's an important point because the School Land Trust Plan then is supposed to support the Teacher and Student Success Plan. It's an academic subset of the Teacher and Student Success Plan. And a School Land Trust Plan, because it's academic, you could spend it on literacy, you could spend it on mathematics, you could spend it on increasing graduation rates. Then there are some non-academic components of the School Land Trust Plan. There's a digital citizenship requirement, a school safety requirement, and a positive behaviors plan requirement. These things tend to be behavioral in nature, and schools can spend up to $7,000 for those behavioral needs if they support an academic goal. You can spend all of your money on behavioral issues if they support an academic goal. So let me just give you 2 examples, one for an elementary school and one for high school. So let's say, for instance, that you have an elementary school and you have identified reading as the greatest need in your school, literacy. And you have reading groups established, and the kids at the school are teasing each other about who's in which reading group. If the council decided that instituting a positive kind of behaviors element to help children celebrate differences and eliminate that kind of bullying and teasing so that kids could feel comfortable in their groups and be able to learn and feel successful wherever they are. If you felt like that was an important component, you could spend money for that behavioral need. Okay, so, but it needs to support an academic goal because the school land trust plan is academic. So let's talk about a high school, for instance. Increasing graduation rates is considered academic under the state board core standards. So if the school is wanting to increase graduation rates and they are recognizing that they have students who need to recover credits, they may need a little support in getting to class so that they don't get further behind. If they're struggling because of online classes and they haven't completed all their work and you need somebody just to follow up with them and encourage them to get their work in, that's really a behavioral thing. That's not really teaching, it's behavioral. But if you're finding you need a tracker or someone to help with recovering graduation rates, keeping kids on task, you could spend money on that as long as it supports an academic goal. Okay, so I keep doing this, sorry. So then, so those behavioral components, if they support an academic goal, they're appropriate. I don't know why I keep doing this. There's one more thing that's a responsibility of the councils in the code, and that is that you are supposed to make recommendations to the administration and the local board. If your community has recommendations that they would like to make, this is the appropriate body to take those recommendations forward. And at the same time, the local board can ask you for input. They could say, you know, sometimes we see districts that are needing to realign boundaries or decide how the boundaries are going to be aligned when they build a new school. And sometimes they go to the councils that are affected and ask them for their input. It's not the only input, but they may be asking you for your opinion on certain things. Okay, we've got a question. So a goal that is only based on improving behavior is not appropriate. That's correct. It must be academic in nature. Behavioral components are okay, but they must support an academic need. That's right. Okay, so
Paula?
Yes.
I would just a quick question, follow up
Sure.
with that. So if the goal is behavioral and not based on an academic need and is in the TSSA plan, but is not being used, we're not funding it through the school land trust, that's okay, right?
You can, yeah, the TSSA, their teacher student success plan, can have non-academic goals in it. So yes, you could do that. You could fund that through TSSA money if that's what the principal has put in their plan. Now, another way to kind of think of this, though, is if you have behavioral needs at your school, you would want to stop and say to yourself, why do we want to address the behavioral needs of the school? Well, part of it is so that kids can learn, right? So they're really closely connected. And usually if there is a behavioral need at the school, it is pretty closely connected to some academic need. So you just need to state what that is, and then you're okay on spending money on that. So controlling vaping or attendance are out. Yeah, I think if you're talking about vaping, that's really a health issue and it should be addressed otherwise. And there is funding to be able to address those kind of health related things. Attendance is okay if you're saying the reason, if you have identified when you do a data discussion and you say, our kids are not doing well in math or reading, maybe it's because they're not in class. Then if you want to put an attendance component in your academic goal, you certainly can do that. That's okay, because you've got to get the kids in class right to be able to teach them. So that part would be okay. That's an okay thing. So this is just kind of a plan to consider how we make sure we have effective academic plans. You want to have a data discussion where you actually are basing your decisions on what you already know about students. And that data discussion should happen before you start preparing your plan. When the principal or whoever presents to you in one of your early meetings about what you're currently doing with your money, what was the plan for this school year, it is appropriate to say, and so why did you come to that decision? So if it was based on data, then it's pretty easy, right? They just go back and say, this is where we were finding students and we wanted to move this specific group of students forward. This is the reason we made this plan. The board review is pretty important because they are aware of your demographics and the needs at your school. They also tend to be a buffer to make sure that we're not funding things that benefit somebody on the council as opposed to the children. And then once the plans are in place, it's important that they get implemented the way you intended for them to be implemented. If you get halfway through the school year and find out that the money for the 3 aides that you plan to hire hasn't been spent, then you're not really implementing that plan. So you would want to go back and say, why didn't we hire 3 aides? Well, the principal may say, we tried and tried, we could only find 2 qualified aides. But that doesn't mean that the discussion ends there. If you know at the beginning of the school year, you could only hire 2 and you had set aside money for 3, the council can have that conversation and say, okay, what was our goal? Is there another way that we can help students achieve that goal by spending this money a different way? So those are certainly things, conversations that the council should be having. Okay, we're going to talk for a minute about sharing the workload so that you don't feel overwhelmed and you and the people on the council are able to be engaged in what's happening. These are things that need to happen. So minutes are required. It's important to have a financial report periodically throughout the year, like just what I just barely explained, right? If you get partway through the year and you find out you are not spending the funds the way you had planned to, then is the time to amend the plan. Not wait until the end of the year and then just be like, oh gosh, we never did hire that 3rd aide, right? So if you have someone who can make a financial report to the council periodically so you can make sure that you're on track. Website compliance is another item, and there's a list of what should be listed on your website. If you just assign someone to go and look and see if it's there, is it current? Or things need to be updated? That doesn't need to be your job. That can be somebody else's assignment. It's important to create a timeline at the beginning of the school year so that you are able to decide what needs to go on which agenda to be able to complete things by the due date. So that's another important assignment. And if someone does that at the beginning of the school year and you adopt it as a council, then you have a guide going forward to make sure that you get the work done. And also it can help you decide if somebody brings something to the council where they they have a concern and they want something else to happen that's not a requirement in the law, the council can consider based on their timeline, is this something that we can take on as a council? Do we need to appoint a task force to kind of address this issue and bring it back to us for our approval? But that timeline will help you be able to make those decisions. And then rules of order and procedure are supposed to be posted on your website, and you're supposed to follow them. And if you don't have them, there is a template on the School Land Trust website. You could have someone pull that up and write out rules for your council. You don't have to use what's on the website. It's just a place to kind of start the conversation. There are certain things that need to be included in those rules of order and procedure, but then have them bring it back to the council and have the council adopt it or make changes. You may already have rules of order and procedure, and you just need to look at them and say, yeah, we think these are good, these will work for us, and then you would just adopt them. It's a good idea to have a parent liaison who attends the meetings of the parent, volunteer parent group at the school. So if you have a PTA or a PTO, it's a good idea to appoint someone to go to those meetings so that you're communicating with each other. You're not working against each other, you're complementing each other. And then there are sometimes task force chairs. So if each one of those people takes one of those assignments, if you make those assignments in a meeting, and each one of them is going to come back in the next meeting or 2 meetings out and make a report, then you just eliminated a lot of work for yourself, and you have people who are going to help you get the work done. So let's look if there are questions here. Let's see. Okay, the question about financial reports. There are some districts that provide a financial report to the principal every every month, so that the principal can see where they are. And if you want that to be the principal's assignment, the principal's a member of the council, the principal could do it. But there have been councils where someone else provided that financial report. So that's up to you. That's a decision the council can make. Do you have to adopt the current rules? Yes. Because each year you have a different council. So like electing your officers, they're your council's officers, the rules should be your rules. So you should adopt them every year. And if you're good with them, that's just an action item, and you just adopt them, and then you're good to go. Okay, let's see what else we got here. Yep. Okay, so a task force chair responsibility is whatever you decide. So for instance, when I was on a school community council at a high school, someone came to us and said, we want to do a Hall of Fame at our school. We want there to be a connection between the students of today and students who were at one time at this high school. We're going to do a Hall of Fame, and we want the council to take this on so it's something that they do annually. Well, it was a pretty big job, but it was a really cool thing that ended up happening where at homecoming every single year, they inducted a former student and a former teacher who had gone on to do important things. And they came to an assembly and they reported to the students in the assembly, this is what it was like when I was here. This is what happened at high school that made me decide to do this thing. And so anyway, that was something that the council decided they wanted to do, but it was a big job. So we appointed a task force, and the chair was a member of the council so that we were communicating all the time. But the rest of the members were not on the council. They were other parents at the school who had interest in wanting to have that happen. In fact, it was a couple of the parents who brought the idea forward, of course, were on the council. So that would be, that part is entirely up to you, however you want to handle that. Okay, let's see. Okay, so this is really the last slide, and then I hope we've got a little bit of time for sharing. So this is kind of preparing for each of your meetings, and you're going to want to plan out a couple of weeks, because so if you're going to meet on the 22nd, a week before, you need to post on the school website and somewhere else at the school, a main area of the school office or someplace else, you need to post the agenda with the date, time, and place. Now, if you're meeting remotely now, you need to include instructions about how someone can join your meeting if you're meeting online. In addition to that, you need to have draft minutes of the prior meeting. And the reason you do this is so that parents at the school know what you're doing. And if they want to attend the meeting, they know what's going to be on the agenda. They know what you talked about at the last meeting. So a week before that probably is a good time to set a regular discussion time with the principal where you can set the agenda together. You're going to know things that need to be on the agenda. The principal's going to know things that need to be on the agenda that you may not know. So you kind of do that together. You'd want to go to that timeline that whoever you assigned to prepared. If you made assignments to people, you're going to want to have those reports on the agenda so that they can report back. If there are action items, you need to state them as action items, because in the minutes, you need anything that's an action item needs to have a vote. So you need to state in the minutes what the motion was. So it might be to approve the school and trust plan for the coming school year, consistent with our discussion, right? And then, so it would be listed on the agenda as discussion and approval of school and trust plan. And then when you do the minutes, you indicate it's an action item and you need to include what the vote was. Okay, we got, let's see, can outside non-committee, absolutely. These are open public meetings. Anybody can attend the meeting. And that's why, especially if you're meeting remotely like we are tonight, you would need to provide on your notice that's posted on the website and also someplace in the school how a person can join that meeting. So you'd want to put the Zoom link or the team meeting link or whatever so that anybody who wants to join that meeting can join that meeting. Okay, let's see. I think this is, oh, one more thing. So see, you led right into the next thing. They are open meetings. Now I'm just remembering one thing that we didn't cover right at the beginning, and that's the part about a vice chair. The law requires that you have a vice chair. The chair must be a parent. The vice chair can be anyone but the principal. There are not specific assignments to a vice chair in the law, but you can make assignments to the vice chair and put it in your rules of order and procedure, or just make the assignments. Or in some cases, the vice chair is just the person who always supports the chair and is there if the chair can't conduct the meeting, you know, whatever. But there aren't specific assignments for vice chairs. In the law, you can certainly make assignments. Okay, so when you actually get to the meeting, you're going to want to make sure that you stay on task and that you follow the agenda. You want to start on time and end on time so that people will want to come to your meetings and know that when you say it's going to be over, it's over, and they can go home and fix dinner or get their kids to soccer practice. It's important for you as the chair to encourage discussion from everyone. You know how it is to be in a meeting where someone just basically takes up all of the space in the room. So one thing that you might want to consider doing is on items, you might want to occasionally, especially on items that are really important, so far as your responsibilities, is to ask every single person. You go around the room and say, we just want to know how everyone on the committee feels about this. And that way you're able to get all the points of view and not just the people who are most comfortable speaking. We've already talked about action items. They require motions and votes, and you need to have a quorum in order to take a vote. So what is a quorum? A quorum is a majority of the members on the council. Sometimes I have people ask, well, we had a majority of the members, but we didn't have a majority of the parents. A quorum is a majority of the group. It doesn't matter the makeup that was there. You don't need to have a majority of parents present. But that's a quorum, and you need to have a quorum in order to take votes. So that's an issue that we sometimes run into when councils get too large and you can't get enough people to the meetings that you have a quorum, then you can't move forward. You can't take any action. So for instance, we had a high school one time that let the principal in the prior year let anybody be on the council who wanted to be on the council. And it was a high school. He seriously had 50 parents who wanted to be on the council, and they all had these different things that they wanted to do. The problem is when they got into the months of the year when there was snow and they were early morning meetings and people didn't want to come, they were not able to get a quorum to be able to do the work of the meeting. So just be careful about that. Then the final thing is usually school community councils are relaxed discussions. Occasionally you'll get into a situation where someone is who is not on the council is taking up a lot of time and the council can't get their work done. If that's the case, then you may have to go to more formal rules where conversations have to go through the chair and people don't just get to speak freely. If you run into a situation like that, make sure that you let us know, because we can help you a little bit with that. So I am going to now see if, let's see, how do I do this? I just need to stop sharing, I think is what I need to do. There. I'll stop sharing, and then I think I can start my video, and then we can, here you all are. So let me go back, and if anybody has questions, you just need to unmute yourself, and then we've got about 7 minutes left. Okay, so let me go down to where we left off. How do we know what we are required to discuss at each meeting? So that would be up to the timeline. So there are suggested timelines on the website, and you're going to want to create your own timeline. The reason being is that your district may have different dates than we've got listed on our website, different due dates. So for instance, the school land trust plans are due in the spring, but every district has a different date. So you want to create a timeline that will work for you. Then when you prepare the agendas, you're able to know when do we need to have the data discussion. That's going to be 1 month. Then the next month, we're going to have a discussion about what's working in our school now. What do we need to address? What is it that we want our plan to look like? What is it going to include? And then maybe one more meeting where you finalize the plan before the principal has to put it on the website. So if that's the case, you're going to want to plan back like 3 months, right? And the only way that you know to do that is by when the due dates are. I heard you always have to have 2 more parents or community members than employees. You have to have at least 2 more parents on the council than employees combined. So you have the principal, so let's say you have the principal and 1 school employee, then you've got to have 4 parents to have a 2-parent member majority. That makes 6, okay? But once those people are on the council, what you need is a quorum to take a vote. Okay, so a quorum of 6 would be 4. You have to have a majority. So you've got to have 4 people in the room, but they don't all have to be parents. Okay, is that better? Is that a little bit more clear? Then you can take a vote. Okay. So other questions, concerns, suggestions for doing things great? Yeah, go ahead, Jennifer.
So I understand like allocating where money be spent should be voted on, but if we make amendments to like our local kind of rules, should we be voting on that? If we're just discussing things informally, like our last meeting, we had a lot of discussion about like distance learning and quarantines and stuff, but it was kind of like more informal information sharing. There wasn't really an action item. So, I mean, how do you decide what's an action item other than like where you allocate money? That is clear to me, but what other things are action items?
Okay, so if you were going to make a decision about something that was going to happen at the school, so like the example that I used about that Hall of Fame, when we decided as a council we were going to take that on as a project, that's an action item. We're going to create a Hall of Fame. So that would be an action item. But you're right, there are lots of discussions that happen. Sometimes you may have meetings and there are no action items.
Okay.
But if you are going to make a decision that's going to affect some kind of change, that's an action item, and it needs to be on your agenda as an action item. So you might want to put several things that potentially could be action items, list them as action items. If you don't take any action, you're good, right? You just have the discussion and let it go.
But what about like volunteering for like a PTA liaison or someone to take minutes? Are those considered action items? I understand like the chair and the vice chair are formal roles, so those have to be nominated and approved. But like, what about kind of volunteering to do a thing?
You're right. That's really more volunteering, where if I was the chair, I would say, these are things that need to happen. Which one do you want to do?
Okay.
Right? Everybody's going to take an assignment. Which one do you want to do? And then it doesn't need to be an action item.
Okay. Sorry, I'm one of those people who just kind of volunteered to be a chair. So I'm like, oh, okay, let me figure out what I'm doing. So thank you.
Yep, sure. Other questions? Okay, I've got a question here about, okay, I think we've answered the action item one. How is the money split? Like what money can be used only for academic goals and what falls under okay to use as behavioral goals? All of the money must be spent for academic goals. All of the money is academic. So the goals are academic, but you can have components of a goal that are behavioral. So for instance, in that example that I gave you about an elementary school, you might have a piece where you're doing a project trying to encourage kids to celebrate differences, to celebrate each other. That could be a component, but it probably isn't going to be the only part of your reading goal. You may be hiring a reading aid. You may be purchasing practice equipment. You may be creating a take-home library. You may be providing professional development for your teachers. So there could be a number of things that you're doing, and that one little piece is behavioral. If you set a behavioral goal that is only behavioral, it will come back to you and you will have to rewrite the goal. Okay? Yeah. So other questions? Let's see. All of the trust money and all of the TSSA money are just the trust funds money. The TSSA money is really up to the principal how that money is spent, and the TSSA money can be spent for behavioral things. Nancy's on the line. Nancy, do you want to add something to that since you're a school board member? Talk a little about TSSA.
I apologize. I came in late and I've missed most of the stuff, Paula. So
You're awesome.
Go ahead. You guys talk and I'll get my thoughts together.
Okay, thank you. Okay, let's see. Is there some place with case studies or other good examples where schools have used their funds for different academic goals? So this is a request we have on a regular basis. It's a little bit of a challenge because what is a great plan in one school may not be a great plan in another school, because it's all based on the needs of your students. Is that making sense? You have the discussion about what are the needs of your students, and then you prepare a plan around that. Now, we are getting lots of requests, and we are going to create a few goals that seem to be, that have been really effective, right? Maybe a couple around literacy, a couple around mathematics, some around science. There are some really great plans out there dealing with graduation rates, and some high schools have had great success increasing graduation rates with school trust funds money. So the answer is I don't have that right now. But that search engine that I showed you at the beginning, where you can go and search schools, but it's kind of like you're just trying to search to find something. So maybe one of you has a plan that you would like to share that worked out really well for your school. I can tell you what I did, but it was my youngest child is too old now. So it may not be relevant anymore. But yeah, do any of you have ideas that you want to share? Things that you've done in your schools?
Paula, I have a question.
Sure.
So we are a K through 8 charter school, and I understand that there are differences between the school community council and the charter trust land council. As far as a timeline, could you help me understand what the differences are for charter councils and what we have to do versus I just want to know what we don't have to do so that I'm not like tasking our council with things that really they don't need to worry about.
Right, that totally makes sense. Let me just tell you that there was a specific charter training that happened last night, and that training is going to be posted on the website. So you may want to go back and look at that.
I did attend that. Actually,
did you?
I was there. Yeah.
Okay. So as far as the timeline goes, charter schools do have a due date. If you are chartered by the State Board of Education, your plans need to be submitted by April the 1st. If you are chartered by, see, I told you my light goes off, right? It just went off. Now it's back on again. If you don't move, it goes off. So that is a due date if you are chartered by the State Board of Education. If you are chartered by another entity, then it may be different. So the date of the school plan submission is different between districts and different between charter schools. The rest is the same. So that October 20th due date, when Karen's been calling to say, please get your committee membership and the principal's assurance submitted online, that is the same for charter schools. And then the final report that will be submitted starting this year in the middle of January, that will be the same for charter schools. So timeline-wise, the only thing that's really different is that you have a set due date for when your plans need to be submitted online, instead of it being up to someone else to decide. Go ahead, sorry.
Okay. We are state funded, and so April 1st has been our due date.
Yeah.
But do charter schools need to be a recommending body for the TSSA and the school safety plan, digital citizenship, HB 58, positive behaviors plan? Like,
Yes.
okay.
Yes, those things are all, as they've been put in the law, the legislators have made those assignments specific to school community councils and charter trust line councils. The only thing that's really very different between the two councils is the members. So the membership is not always the same. There are some differences in what need to be posted on websites, but for the most part, it's very similar. It's very much the same.
Thank you. I appreciate your help.
Sure. Other questions?
Sorry, can I, this isn't exactly a question. This is kind of a word of warning. We had our school community council targeted by a phishing scam. And so I received an email. I'm also an employee, but I'm serving under, I'm serving as a community member. But my personal email, I received what looked like an email from the principal asking me to go get gift cards and things like that. It said her name on it, but the email was obviously fake if I went to look for it. But I'm pretty sure that it was either through our school website or through the listing, wherever we have been posted as members with our emails. So I didn't know if you just want to let your councils know, principals will not be sending you emails to go pick up stuff and, all of that outside of, council activities.
The same thing happened to our school in this year in the spring.
Wow.
So, and it was just among council members. So.
Well, this is the first that I've heard about this, but it is that is a concern, and we might put together. We get these warning emails in my office. I get one every single week that tells me now, be careful about this, right? But it hadn't really occurred to me that this might be a problem for council. So thank you for that heads up. We probably need to remind councils, the thing that they always tell us is if you're in question, contact the source, don't click on any links, right? Go back to the main source and don't click on any links if you're not expecting the email or it seems out of place, then don't click on any links. Okay, I'm realizing that we are over time and there's another sharing time going on right now. So I want to thank all of you for participating. Thank you for being willing to be chairs and vice chairs. It's an additional responsibility and additional work. So thank you. Please know that website page that I showed you, our contact information is there, and you can contact us anytime with any kind of questions that you have. Just thank you for being here, and I'll let you go so that you can get to the sharing time. It seems to be a favorite of people when you can share experiences and ideas. So thanks so much. And Nancy, thank you for backing me up tonight. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Are you ready to join?